All right. Hello again, adventurers, and welcome to another exciting daily vlog. This is daily vlog number 30. We've been doing this almost for a solid month. And other than me forgetting to upload one day, they've actually all come out. Like, this is interesting for me. However, today, I am going to ensure that you will never see me again. Yes, I am going to get canceled today. Those who are wondering, what is it I'm going to do? Am I going to say something so obscene that the internet can never forgive me? Am I going to do something so inappropriate that people have no choice but to ensure that I'm hunted down and die? No, nothing like that. I am going to talk about an article that, as far as I can tell, is freaking radioactive. And the reason it is radioactive is because it calls out something in the TTRPG community. And by the TTRPG community, I don't mean like people that enjoy RPGs. I'm talking about the actual complete like market of tabletop RPGs, and it specifically calls out a lot of really high up people and shows them doing some incredibly unethical and horrible things. And because of that, this article was written and published on Medium, I believe on the 25th. So like 5 days ago. If you attempt to find the Medium article now, it doesn't exist. There were recordings of interviews that were done for this article. The article itself is written by a researcher in the social worker field, specifically in researching and I can't remember the exact phraseology that the writer used, but basically they research things that can be used to improve talk therapy effectively. And they somehow got onto the topic of cancel culture as it exists in the tabletop RPG community, and the fact of how rampant and voracious the cancel culture drive is in this particular community. And due to the fact that they called out some very, very big names and specifically focused on a case study of someone that I'm going to say their name. And when I say the name, some of you are going to have a guttural reaction. Some of you are going to feel so offended that I have even mentioned this name that you may stop watching the video at that particular point. And say nasty things about me in the comments and start looking for ways to prove that I'm a disgusting, horrible person. And that name is Zach Smith. For those of you who have never heard this name before, I would be kind of surprised. It probably means that you're relatively new to the tabletop RPG community. And by relatively, I mean within the past probably about 3 to 4 years. The reason why I say that is in 2019, Zach Smith was removed from tabletop RPG communities. And I don't just mean that people don't want to work with him. I'm not talking like a Satine Phoenix thing where everybody just doesn't like her. I'm talking about references to him have been removed from everything. He was originally listed in the Player's Handbook. And if you have a Player's Handbook that was printed before 2019, his name shows up multiple times in it because he actually helped consult on D&D 5th edition when it was being written and created, and he was listed specifically as having helped. And everybody around 2019, a little bit before that, I think the allegations started in like 2017 or something like that, but everybody has universally agreed that he is a horrible, disgusting individual that has done unspeakable things to everybody. Like, literally, there is not a single person in the tabletop RPG professional community that does not have a story about horrible, disgusting things that this particular individual has done. And the article in question uses him as a case study because it turns out all of it was made up. Now, I guess I should probably say something to the effect of allegedly or anything like that to avoid defamation lawsuits and all that stuff. I have nothing. Like, if somebody wants to sue me, it's pointless. I can't fight it or anything. I have no money to hire a lawyer. I can't leave my house. I barely function in society. So if anyone wants to yell at me and try to cancel me, go for it. There's quite a few things. People have tried to cancel me in my own hometown years ago. It didn't work because the stuff that they made up about me was so obviously fake. But it still ended up in me, getting things like getting kicked out of show choir and stuff like that. Which wasn't the worst thing that's ever happened to me in my life, obviously. But the article in question, as I am recording this, my intention is to have a link to an archive.org version of the article, because again, the Medium article doesn't exist anymore. So my intention is to have a link to the archive.org version of the article so that you can read it and come to your own conclusions. However, like I said, this article is radioactive. Everywhere that it has been posted except this archive.org archive of it, it has been removed. It was deleted from Medium. SoundCloud deleted all of the interview excerpts. Somebody actually went and actually made a YouTube video that recorded all of the excerpts, which I'm not going to link just for fear of linking another person to this and possibly getting them into trouble, and that's not my intention for this. But that is my intention. If something happens where YouTube, for whatever reason, decides that I'm not allowed to show this video or something unless I remove the link, I will, or if something starts happening to me where, like, I get targeted by some group and seriously bad things that are hazardous to my health, I may remove the link itself, just as a way to kind of protect my own life. So if there isn't a link to that article, it's also possible I just forgot to do it. But more likely, I have done that due to fear of very bad things happening. So understand, if you decide to bring this up with other people, this is not a touchy subject. This is go directly to internet jail. Do not pass go. Do not collect $200. And that was the thing that made me so interested in this at first. However, this article is written by someone with a doctorate, someone who is a research doctor. And what that means, the term doctor gets thrown around a lot by a lot of different people. And people get upset when the wrong kind of doctor calls themselves a doctor because they consider the term doctor to be exclusively defined as a medical doctor. And that hasn't ever been true in history. In fact, the use of doctors using it as a term to indicate a medical profession actually is a new thing, and the term doctor previously just referred to someone that was extremely learned. But anyway, a research doctor is effectively someone that, instead of practicing whatever their field is, they devote their time to researching the field. So you can have a doctorate in medicine and not actually treat patients. You can work in the research field. And this is an extremely important aspect of being a doctor. And a lot of practicing doctors do research as well. But it's not their primary focus. For a research doctor, that is all they do, or that is their primary focus. In this particular instance, I believe this doctor, she has a doctorate in, I believe, social work, which, another thing a lot of people don't realize, talk therapists, a lot of people assume that they're exclusively psychologists. And that's not true. Social workers, a licensed clinical social worker, is just as often, if not more often, going to be the therapist than a psychologist is. Because psychologists, a lot of times, especially if you get a doctorate in psychology, a lot of times that doctorate is geared significantly more towards research than it is to practical application. But social work is much more focused on practical application rather than research. We actually have a similar thing in the business world. Have you ever heard of an MBA, which is a Master's of Business Administration? An MBA is considered kind of the highest degree that someone that is actually working in business would ever want to get. Anything past an MBA or a Master's of Business that's not an MBA, because there are more research-focused business master's degrees that I can't think of any off the top of my head, or if you go into a doctorate of business, that is the exclusive focus of a doctorate of business is entirely on research, and it's not really useful at all for someone that's actually going to be running a business. So same kind of basic thing. Most social workers stop at the master's level because anything beyond that is purely for research purposes. So the author of this particular article, which I'm going to actually list her name, Dr. Cleo Bell Wiseman. She has a doctorate in social work or something like that. She actually does this. All right, so I'm going to read how she explains herself. I have a research-based degree from Oxford University Center for Evidence-Based Social Intervention. I got my Master's of Social Work at Smith College School for Social Work. I have a doctorate from the University of Birmingham in the Department of Social Work, Sociology, and Criminology. She's published a bunch of papers and then talks about other things that I don't find to be particularly useful to this conversation, but she felt the need to explain because of cancel culture. So, that being said, when I read this article, because it's written by someone that has a doctorate in research, she has a research doctorate, I can read a scientific paper. It's one of the things that I learned in college because psychology is actually a really big part of business management in general. And while a lot of managers don't know anything about it, I love psychology. And so I started learning how to read psychological papers and research papers and things like that. So I can understand what a scientific paper says, and I can understand almost everything in it. Granted, I am given the ability to look up terms and phrases that are just not a part of my sphere of knowledge. So when I read this, it made sense to me. However, if I was ever asked to peer review something in this field, I would be at a loss because I don't understand the research standards. I don't understand a lot of where the research comes from because it's just not in my field of study. If I was to do something about training, I feel that I could peer review an article on training because that's something that I specialize in and I've done a lot of research into it. So, before I completely talk out of my ass, I actually contacted a friend who will remain nameless because of, again, how radioactive this article is. If they decide that they want to talk about this on their own, then I have no problem going, oh yeah, this is the person that I talked to. But until they take that step, they will remain completely nameless. However, they have significantly more knowledge in this particular field than I do. And I asked them to just read it over and give me an opinion. And their opinion in and of itself, I'm not going to go into too many details of because it goes into stuff that, again, I'm not comfortable talking about because I have such limited experience and information on it. But one of the things that they did clarify is, as far as they can tell, the research itself looks to be done above board. It looks like the research itself is solid. The conclusion they come to at the end of the article seems like it might be tainted a little bit by bias. But to be blunt, most research papers that are coming out right now are extremely filled with bias. So the idea that this one has a pretty obvious bias to it throughout the entire article, and that bias pretty obviously influenced some of the conclusions that they came to, is not surprising to me. I also don't believe that that invalidates the entire thing. You just have to understand that, okay, there is a bias here. So as long as you're willing to kind of admit that, okay, there's a bias here, the data, the underlying data is still really, really good data. And you can come to your own conclusions from it. So that being said, I feel confident that the stuff that they're talking about here, while maybe not presented in the best way possible and skewed a little bit by their own bias, is 100% real. And when I first read it, I had this feeling 100% that it was very real, because I've experienced similar things in the tabletop RPG community, having dealt with the critters and them going on nonsense cancel tirades that turned out to be based on bullshit, and the whole OGL debacle was a cancel culture raid that was based on lies and misinformation. So I have my own experience and instantly felt that this article was extremely accurate. And knowing my own biases, that immediately meant, I really do need to get someone else to look at this, because I'm believing this, and the article itself actually doesn't cite a ton of actual proof for the allegations this is in there. They make references to things that are very, very easy to look up. And they have audio recordings that you can't really dispute. Like, these people are actually literally saying these things. They're not taking out of context in the idea that the entire statement is there. Obviously, they are short clips of a longer interview, so there's always a possibility that context is missed there, but the words that they use are blatant. It's really difficult. Like, I had a hard time trying to come up with a way that these could have been taken in a different context or said in a different context. So yeah, overall, basically the summary of this is you have a practicing therapist whose emphasis is significantly more on research now than actual talk therapy, noticing a trend in the tabletop RPG community of just everybody is horrible and disgusting here. Like, everybody in the community, at least the big names, are all horrible, disgusting people. How does she know that? Well, because they all like tattletale on each other. Like, this person doesn't like this person, and then this person will say that this person assaulted this person, and then this person would say that this person did this, and they all just are constantly fighting amongst each other. And she lists a bunch of really, really big names in here because she interviewed quite a few of them, and then was able to look at emails and Twitter statements and other things that they've publicly said that supports everything that she mentioned. And yeah, if you really get in the tabletop RPG space and look at, like, there is a new abuser or new just person non grata every other week. That this person is evil because of this reason, or this person is evil because of this reason. And generally what happens is, as soon as someone is accused, they have someone else that they also have to accuse. And so it turns into this strange, just repeating accusations of everyone. And so the thing that originally inspired this article, according to the article, was, and this is a statement that I absolutely hate because it's 100% false. And this is where the first part of the bias comes in. I'm trying to see if I can find it. Anyway, I can't find the exact quote in here, and so I'm going to paraphrase. But effectively, the author basically says, I understand why right-wingers want to destroy diverse communities. which is basically saying that I understand why the right wants just everybody on the left to be hurt. And so they obviously, the right is going to lie and cheat and steal and do everything they can to hurt these communities because that's what they do. It's not, never has been, that statement has never been true ever. And the best part about it is the right, according to the left, has grown exponentially to include half of the left now. So the idea that the right is this evil, warmongering, disgusting group of people that just wants everybody they don't like to die is not true. But the next statement is the thing that kind of inspired the article, which is, I don't understand why these diverse groups would want to lie and harm each other. Which again shows another bias, the idea that somehow just because you are part of some minority group, of which I belong to a few, that somehow that means that you would never hurt another minority group. And that is a completely false statement. And we've seen it time and time again. The infighting on the left is well known and documented. They tend to eat themselves really, really good. The right does it as well. There really isn't anyone that doesn't do this. But that was, according to the article, the thing that really inspired her to do this deep dive is why are all of these people that are already in minority groups, that are already oppressed, effectively oppressing each other? That doesn't make sense to me. And so the article continues going on, and she's able to bring up a lot of things where this person accused this person of doing something, and then it was shown that it was completely false, either because they recanted it themselves, or they said a contradicting statement somewhere else, or the really fun ones, they claim that this person did something to them when it's verified that they weren't even in the same state when they claimed that it happened. So the lies and misinformation are rampant in the tabletop RPG community. And I think a lot of people that have been involved in it for long enough have known this is the thing for a while. Again, I got a lot of people mad at me when I started claiming the OGL thing was a bunch of lies and misinformation. And for the most part, I was proven correct. Like over and over and over again, we would hear, well, this is what's happening. No, it's not. And that wasn't true when you said it. Well, maybe it wasn't. That wasn't, but this is really no, it wasn't, and it wasn't true when you said it. Well, yeah, but it's still bad because of this. Maybe, I don't know. I'm tired of fact checking your lies. My favorite example of that was trusted sources in WotC claimed that all of the surveys that they do for 1D&D, nobody listens to any of that stuff, and they never have. And then like 4 or 5 different people, both currently working for Wizards of the Coast and no longer working for Wizards of the Coast, went, no, we have people that their sole job is to read surveys and collect the data to turn into something that's useful for us. And then when presented with, well, no, you blatantly lied about that, the trusted source said, well, they used to, but they don't anymore. They definitely don't listen to you anymore. And then Wizards of the Coast went, no, actually, we just released a video last week that showed specifically how we listen to each piece of feedback, the specific numbers that we were getting with each piece of feedback, and how that related to what we were changing. So they blatantly lied. And again, this is not exclusive to Dungeons & Dragons, though the title of the article and a lot of the discourse in the article would kind of claim that this is a D&D thing because they kind of group all of tabletop RPGs into Dungeons & Dragons, which isn't true. But from the outside, a lot of people consider the entirety of tabletop RPGs to just be D&D. So I understand the mistake that she made. It was a dumb mistake to make, especially as a researcher. And one of the things that she specializes is in bias in research. So the fact that she couldn't tell her own bias is I'm trying to think of the right word here. It's not great. That being said, the stuff that she brings up is absolutely true. And she provides a decent amount of receipts for it. again, most of it is just, well, she references this thing, but she doesn't link to it or anything like that. The references are easy enough to look up and find that, yeah, they are true. So calls out all these big people, and she's trying to come up with a reason why. And eventually she does discover something, and she's looking for what's called a case study, which is basically where you look at one specific case of something happening and you go kind of into a deep dive into it to try and discover exactly what happened, what are the variables involved. And case studies are used to eventually make much more broader declarations. You generally have to start with at least one case study, and then generally what you want to do if you're researching something is you want to have a lot of different case studies. And then you start comparing the different case studies and see what's similar in them and what's different. And you can start recognizing what are called outliers, which is basically real data points that are either mistakes or just random mutations of data. And the more case studies you have, the easier it is to basically make a kind of group judgment and start creating things like causal relationships, other things like that are essential for science to continue. So she found her case study, and her case study was Zach Smith. Again, the name itself is horrible in the tabletop RPG space. A lot of people think that he is this horrible person that does things that you can't say on YouTube to women. He used to work in the adult entertainment industry. He was married to another adult entertainment industry worker. Again, other things that you're not allowed to say on YouTube. And his ex-wife made a bunch of allegations that turned out to have nothing to support them. And then a lot of other people just started repeating these allegations without checking them. And it turned into this massive thing. And they're even turned into this thing where Mike Mearls, a lot of people, you know the name Mike Mearls because he's an evil, horrible, disgusting person that helped an abuser abuse his victims. None of that's true. It was made up on a thing that predated 4chan. It was basically a trolling website that people just made shit up because they were mad at people, and somebody took it to believe it is true. And it was never true. It's never been proven. There's never been any evidence that shows in any way that it happened. But everyone believes that Mike Mearls is this horrible, disgusting person. And they cheered when he got laid off, despite the fact that he hasn't worked on the D&D team for a few years now. And he got laid off in December with all the other people that laid off at Hasbro. And everyone cheered because he's a horrible, disgusting person based on nothing. It was based on a troll post on a troll website. But everyone believes it. I will guarantee people that are watching this right now, if you are involved in the tabletop RPG community, this is probably the first time you have ever heard that Mike Mearls did not share information with Zach Smith that helped him to target his victims and abuse them a second time. You are probably you are probably convinced that 100% definitely happened, and there's tons of receipt and proof that it did happen. It didn't. And there's never been an ounce of proof. There has never been anything to even imply that ever happened. It was something that was made up on the equivalent of a 4chan board. But it fit the narrative, and it helped the people that didn't like Zach Smith, and so it became fact. And now it has become legend. And it's not true. Apparently, according to this article, Zach Smith has sued a bunch of different people for defamation and continues to win. To the point where I actually searched on Twitter the name Zach Smith. And most of the references I got one reference that actually linked this article, which was useful because between the time that I read the article and by the time I went to see who posted it, the post had disappeared. So I have no idea who it was that posted this that I first was able to look at it. But again, it's radioactive. It's getting wiped off the internet. But most of the other posts were from, I believe, like August of 2023, because one of the people that accused Zach Smith was going to court. Eventually, he settled. I can't remember if he settled or it actually went to court and Zach Smith won. But he was forced as part of the result of that, whether it was a settlement or a judgment, he was forced as a result of that to release a statement saying, I had no evidence when I accused Zach Smith of this, and to my knowledge, there is no evidence that it exists. He had to make this statement. He posted it onto the Twitter, and everybody quote retweeted this and basically said, "Oh yeah, this is a total lie," and we all know that Zach is really a person that you can't say on YouTube. Actual proof from one of his accusers recanting his statement, and the result is no. Doesn't matter if somebody recants. This is what I've chosen to believe, and therefore, it is true. No matter what, doesn't matter how many people recant. Doesn't matter how many times we are shown legitimate proof that this was all made up by someone that in the article, and again, this is me quoting what was in the article. This is not my personal opinion. This is what is said in the article. I want to make sure I am stating that because it includes allegations of mental health. According to the article, the ex-wife possibly has borderline personality disorder. For those of you not aware, personality disorders is kind of a broad term for a bunch of different mental illnesses, and they all suck. There's a huge stigma with personality disorders in general, to the point where a lot of people that have either been diagnosed with them or should be diagnosed with them will refuse to talk about it or refuse to go get diagnosed, because there is this massive stigma with anyone that has any kind of personality disorder that they are an evil, disgusting sociopath. Sociopathy itself is connected to a few personality disorders, and psychopathy, as in psychopath, is actually connected specifically to a personality disorder called antisocial personality disorder. Basically, the clinical diagnosis of psychopath is antisocial personality disorder, as far as my understanding is concerned. Again, if someone is more knowledgeable about these various personality disorders, you are more than welcome to correct me in the comments. I do not consider myself an expert on it, but I am very familiar with them due to my own experiences with mental health and kind of strange diagnoses in general. So, borderline personality disorder is not psychopathy or sociopathy or anything like that. Borderline personality disorder is effectively a massive fear of abandonment combined with an inability to control certain emotions. It's significantly more complicated than that, but it tends to exhibit itself as poor impulse control, really poor relationships in general, like an inability to maintain close relationships, and massive mood swings. Those tend to be very typical of borderline personality disorder. And one of the symptoms, according to the article, is kind of just anytime something bad happens to someone with borderline personality disorder, they will find a way to blame it on somebody else. It is never their fault. They are always the eternal victim. Again, this is from the article. This is not my opinion. Please do not get mad about me. Please do not get mad at me for that. And so they use the fact that this ex has both claimed that she does have borderline personality disorder, and then also claimed that she doesn't have borderline personality disorder, and then said it was undiagnosed, and then said she's never been diagnosed, and she said a lot of different conflicting things. But according to this therapist, this person just making up outlandish stories about how Zach is this horrible, disgusting, abusive person that did these horrible, disgusting things to her is not outside the realm of reason for someone with borderline personality to just make up. Because again, that was one of the questions that was the question that kind of inspired this deep dive and eventually this case study into Zach Smith, was this idea of I don't understand why in the world someone would do this to people that are already part of a marginalized community. It doesn't make sense to me. And remember that statement I made a long time ago where I hate the phrase, it doesn't make sense? Well, this is the correct result of it doesn't make sense. Obviously, I'm missing something. so I need to research this further. This is where it doesn't make sense actually spurs you to do something about it, to understand why it doesn't make sense. And so this is the explanation that, at least to the author of the article, made the most sense, is that it fits with the idea of someone with borderline personality disorder doing something to reduce their fear of abandonment. It's like, well, it wasn't my fault that I'm now alone. It's their fault because they're a bad person. And again, this is not me saying this is what borderline personality disorder, or people with borderline personality disorder, do on a regular basis or anything like that. I do not understand that particular mental disorder well enough to be able to stereotype it in any way, shape, or form. I'm just saying that according to this researcher, that it is something that could be explained by borderline personality disorder. So, please understand, this is not me saying that anyone with BPD is somehow evil or is always lying or anything like that. I'm saying the researcher says that this is a logical explanation for why this particular person did this particular thing. Not that everybody with BPD will do this. Okay, moving on. She then proceeds to look into the lawsuits that Zach's filed, the various emails that have shown up that people have said that he abused me here and abused me here, and would reference particular emails, and then she would read the emails and go, there's nothing abusive in here at all. The problem most people have with Zach Smith, apparently, is the fact that anytime somebody makes an accusation, he will go, where's the proof? And that in and of itself is something that I do have experience with. After the whole Me Too thing blew up, the idea of asking someone for proof became a form of abuse. And I have seen this constantly on Twitter, and I've seen it in my own life, talking to my own friends. The idea that asking for proof is somehow a form of abuse is kind of an accepted standard, to the point where if you go to r/RPG, which is a subreddit particularly related to tabletop RPGs, one of their rules is you are not allowed to ask for proof, which is mentioned in the article as, wow, because Zach Smith apparently used to be a moderator there, and one of his rules was any allegations require proof. And then when all this stuff happened, he got kicked off from that board, and they changed the rule to you're not allowed to ask for proof. And the researcher actually asked one of, I think, the former moderators of r/RPG, basically kind of did a hypothetical of, well, so what happens if someone does blatantly lie? You're not allowed to ask them to prove it. So, I mean, this is like the perfect time, and r/RPG is the perfect place to make completely false allegations and never be caught about it. And the moderator in and of himself went, I mean, I guess that's kind of true, but the other side is a lot of abusers have claimed, have used this you can't prove anything as a way to silence their victims. And so therefore we're erring on the side of the victims so that, we don't have to re-traumatize them, which is not a bad point. The statement that a lot of abusers have used the fact that you couldn't prove what they did as a way to silence victims is a true statement. The reason I know this is a true statement is my abuser told me that. And so I have a really visceral reaction when, specifically when people accuse me of lying. It triggers my PTSD because I was told flat out, no one will believe you if you say anything. So you better not talk. So again, this is a really great example of a bad thing being done for a good purpose. Yes, the idea that forcing someone to prove certain allegations and things like that can re-traumatize them, and it has been used by abusers to silence victims. However, the idea that we just believe people because they say they're being truthful is moronic. It really is. There's no other way to say this, that simply because it's this subject matter, and obviously no one would ever lie about this subject matter, is malarkey. There's tons and tons and tons and tons and tons of studies that have shown that everybody lies about everything. And specifically, the idea of, and this is going to really, really piss people off, and I want to kind of preface this with the idea of, I do not believe that sexual assault victims are lying or anything like that. However, statistically, it is one of the most, if not the most, lied about crime. And the way where I get that from is a couple different studies. There was a few studies that were done in the 90s for like 7 years in a row. The FBI would release, back when DNA evidence was real new, the FBI would release these statistics, and one of the statistics that they found out was in cases where a bad thing was done to a woman by a man, and there was DNA evidence. So this is not every single person that reported it to the police, not even every single person that this has ever happened to. This is an extremely small subset, which is, it happened, it was reported to the police, it was bad enough that the FBI got involved, because these are FBI records, not local police. So this is already a subset of a subset of a subset. And DNA evidence was available. Another subset. So this is a very, very tiny subset of a much larger set. In those cases, 20% of the time, it was not possible for the person to that was accused of the crime to have committed it, because the DNA didn't match them. Not that, well, she said it was consensual when it wasn't, or she said it wasn't consensual when it was, or there was a or alcohol was involved. No, it was the DNA of the person that did the deed did not match the person that was accused 20% of the time. Now, can we extrapolate that for everything? Absolutely not. Fun fact, for crimes in general, people get accused of falsely committing crimes all the time. And in general, on average, somewhere between about 3 to 4% of accusations of any crime ever is a false accusation. So what does that mean? It means like 97 to 96% of crimes are not false accusations. I would consider that the vast majority. However, 4% is still a very large number when you consider the fact that millions upon millions of crimes are committed every year. That means that there's probably millions of people that are falsely accused every single year. Doesn't mean that everybody's a liar. Just means that false accusations happen. And specifically for sexual assault, that actually that number jumps up, depending on whose numbers you want to use, anywhere between 8 to 12%. So it is anywhere between 3 to 4 times more likely than the average for that particular crime to be a lie. Again, even if we use the highest number we've seen, which is 20%, it still means 80% are not fake. So the idea that everyone saying this is lying or something has never been supported by any scientific anything. But it is also a blatant lie to say that no one would ever lie about this. They lie about it constantly. And this is the only data we have is for people that reported it to the authorities. There's never been a study, and they say this in the article itself, there's never been a study, and I don't believe there could be a study, about how many people, how often people lie to their friends or colleagues or business groups that these things happened when they didn't. So, going back to the original article and everything, so she's able to I don't know if prove, but she's able to present a pretty strong defense on the idea that everything that happened to Zach Smith was based entirely on lies, and a lot of the people that were telling the lies were not just innocently, I didn't realize it wasn't true. Like, a lot of these lies were intentional. And she actually interviewed people that, while she was interviewing them, they were blatantly lying to her. And she was able to prove it right then, and they still had no problem with it. They didn't think there is any issue with that. And she actually theorizes later on in the article that a lot of people kind of justify the idea of lying about this particular crime is completely justified because, well, a lot of people don't get prosecuted for it. So while, yeah, we might be lying about this particular instance, more likely than not, it has happened. They've just never been caught, which is a horrible, horrible thing, resolution to come to. The idea that, well, yeah, I don't have any proof of this, but he probably did it, so I'm going to lie about it to ensure that they get in trouble. Like, that's horrible. There was a really good example. There was this girl that was dubbed Mattress Girl because she carried a mattress around her university for like a year or something like that. It might have been shorter. I don't remember specifically. Because she reported an assault and they didn't do anything about it. And the person that assaulted her was still at the school. And so she did this out of protest. Came out later, never happened. She'd never been assaulted. But she had heard a story from a friend that she decided was true. And so she decided to lie about it in an attempt to bring more light to the subject in and of itself. And again, this article kind of reinforces that is a very legitimate idea in large portions of society. Is it's okay to lie as long as you think that the person has probably done something that they deserve to be punished for, which is horrendous. Now, something that my friend brought up that I think actually applies to the stuff that I normally talk about here, despite the fact that I am an assault survivor. Multiple times when I was very, very young, bad things were done to me that I can't talk about on YouTube that caused my PTSD, and then I had a significant other that also abused me. So I am an abuse survivor. So this does hit very close to home, especially since that same significant other also accused me of, falsely accused me of abusing her, and bad things happened to me, despite the fact that there is no evidence that it ever happened, and it didn't happen. I am very familiar with this because it's happened to me personally. That being said, something that my friend, who again, significantly more knowledgeable on this subject, did bring up that I thought was really, really fascinating was the idea that the initial question for this article was, why would people in minority groups actively sabotage each other? That's for the right to do, not us. That question's never answered. The author kind of laser focuses on her case study and completely forgets that was the purpose of this. And the data in here actually, again, according to my friend, there's actually enough data here to come up with a plausible solution to that question, which is when the researcher asked these people, well, why would you repeat something, and why would you take action based on something that you didn't think was true? Because a lot of these people have said flat out, well, I didn't really believe them, but they were my friend, or there was no proof or anything that would even indicate that was true, but they were my friend, so they asked me to do this, and I did this. And in the regular business world, to be perfectly honest, this actually happens a lot more than a lot of people know, but it's done in very, very controlled instances, and it's actually a form of currency in the business world. It's basically to call in a favor from someone to do something, whether or not you have a justification for it. It is something that happens, but it's significantly rarer than what's happening in the tabletop RPG community space. And my friend kind of postulated the idea that it's because these people don't treat these relationships as business relationships. They treat them as either friend relationships or kind of parasocial relationships, because a lot of the people spreading this information that 100% believe these have never met these other people, have no reason to believe or trust them, but they've developed this kind of parasocial relationship with them, and so they consider them their friend, despite the fact that they have no relationship with them. And that does bring up some actual business stuff, which is something I do consider myself an expert in. The idea of when you turn your hobby into a business, the quickest way to fail is to continue treating it as a hobby. And when you start a business with friends, the fastest way to go bankrupt is to continue treating your friends as friends in the business. And we've seen this over and over. I think one of my, well, not favorite, but one of the most blatant examples of it is, what were they called? Oh, damn it. I'm going to look it up because it's annoying me. I can't remember any of their names now. It's old SourceFed hosts that I can't remember any of their names. Who were the hosts? Give me the hosts. Hosting. Not Ross. Lee Newton. There's one of them. Valley Folk. That's what it's called. So the Valley Folk. The Valley Folk was this cool Patreon-fueled YouTube channel that basically brought together 4 former SourceFed hosts. Hosts. Wow, that was super smart. It was Joe Beretta, Elliot Morgan, Steve Zaragoza, and then Lee Newton. And they were really fun. Like, I used to love them when they were in SourceFed, and then the first year, effectively, of the Valley Folk was really, really good stuff. They work very well together. Lee is an absolute genius when it comes to writing and kind of improvisational comedy. She was phenomenal. The rest of the group is really good as well. And then they got on this TV show called Show Me the Funny, where a bunch of sketch comedians and other kind of funny people all competed to get a kind of production contract from, I think it was NBC that did it, and Kenan Thompson was one of the judges. I think Chrissy Teigen was another, and then the last one was Jeff Foxworthy. And so they competed on Show Me the Funny, and they won. And then like a week or two after they won, they announced that they had kicked Lee Newton out of the Valley Folk. And the way that they did it was really, really bad. Like, they made this really nonchalant, almost humorous announcement of, yeah, she's gone. So, yeah, that's good. None of us are upset about it in any way, shape, or form. And then Lee Newton released her own video where she goes, yeah, I had no idea this was happening. It has completely crushed me. I thought that these people were my friends, and they just decided that I'm not allowed to be a part of the group. Literally after winning $100,000, weeks after winning $100,000, they announced that, yep, she's no longer part of the group. No, by the way, nobody knows what actually happened and why she was out. There's been so much speculation about it. I have done deep dives into it. No one's talking. And that's perfectly fine. They're allowed to have their secrets and stuff like that. But I think it is very obvious that these people went into business with each other as friends and not as business associates. And when they got to the point where they had to start acting like a business, they didn't know how to do that. And it ended up with one of them getting thrown out. And as of right now, the Valley Folk is effectively defunct. They don't make videos on their YouTube channel anymore. They used to have a podcast. I don't know if they're still doing that. And all of them have gone on to other things. When the Valley Folk first started, they were full-time Valley Folk. And now I know Joe works for the React channel, and I believe he did before the Valley Folk as well. I have no idea what Elliot is doing, no idea what Steve is doing, and Lee is doing her own thing. But no, the Valley Folk in and of itself, as soon as the announcement happened, they started hemorrhaging followers, hemorrhaging patrons, and they never recovered. And that's what happens when friends start a business and aren't able to go, hey, by the way, we're friends, but in this particular aspect, we have to act like a business. And eventually you will come to the point where you have to act like a business or you'll go bankrupt. And it ruins friendships because people don't understand how to create that separation of, you're my friend, but we're also in business together. And I have to run a business, and you can't be friends with your business partners. because that will make you do stupid things like believe them when they tell you things that are obviously false. Um, example from my own life. And I guess it's been long enough, and I'm not going to name who this was, but they were stupid. A former person that I worked with, that will remain nameless because what they did was massively stupid, was working in a store that I also worked at. We were both on the management team. They were closing the store, or they working a closing shift. They weren't, I believe they weren't specifically closing the store at that point. They had a call from someone who claimed to be from loss prevention for the company that we worked for. This is the first thing that shouldn't have happened because both this person and I, not only do we know basic loss prevention stuff because we were trained, we actually know the specific loss prevention person for our district and had many conversations with that particular individual over and over and over again. We knew them by name. We had their phone number in our phones. So this is the first mistake that they made. Person claiming to be from corporate loss prevention, which technically would have been above our direct person, claims that they had video of me while I was working with a customer. The customer turned around and had left their wallet on the counter, and I had gone and I had stolen something like $1,000 from them. Or maybe more. I can't remember what the exact total was. And they had me on camera doing this. And the person that I'd done this to was considering suing the company for it. And if the company got sued, I would be fired immediately. The lawsuit would be shifted from the company itself to me, and I would lose everything. I would become instantly bankrupt, and I also would become unhireable in the industry. If something like this happens, you never work in the industry again. Some of that is 100% true. Not the part that I stole anything. I never would have done that. And I didn't do that. And they had no proof of me doing it because it never happened. But the idea that if you do something stupid when you are working for a corporation, what basically happens is the corporation goes, we told them not to do that. Here's in our employee handbook that specifically says don't do that. Or it's something so stupid like stealing from a customer that they can go, yeah, no, everybody knows. They don't have to specifically say don't steal from customers in the employee handbook. That's just assumed to be, yeah, don't do anything illegal while on the clock. And so they would go, what we did is we fired them for disobeying our rules. Because of that, you're not allowed to target us because it wasn't our fault that he did that. It was his fault. And now the entire lawsuit shifts over to the single person. When I was getting loss prevention training, that was one of the stories we were told was about this manager who didn't follow the rules for making what's called an apprehension, which is basically when someone steals something. An apprehension is when you go out and you accuse them of stealing the thing and you try to bring them back in to recover the stolen property. There's a huge long list of things that you have to do, which includes physically seeing them hide the object on their person, never letting them leave your sight so that they can't just ditch the item somewhere, and then watching them walk past the point of sale with the item still concealed on them. Well, this particular manager had seen them steal it, but hadn't kept him in eyesight the entire time he was in the store, and didn't see the guy put it back. And the guy wasn't even attempting to steal anything. He put it in his pocket because he didn't have a cart. And when he decided he wasn't going to buy it, he just put it in a random shelf, which is extremely common in retail. But the manager didn't see that. And so he thought that the guy had walked out of the store with merchandise. So he went out, accused the guy of stealing it, makes an apprehension. The guy, of course, denied it because he didn't do it. And things started to get aggressive, and the guy just decides to throw a punch at this manager. Well, the manager had martial training, and it kicked in instantly. Blocks the punch, throws the guy to the ground. Associates start coming up because they're watching their manager get somebody try to attack their manager and fail miserably. He had the associates get him some zip ties. Zip tied the dude, dragged him to the back, which just so happened in the back they actually had some of the concrete was damaged and some of the rebar was showing. Rebar is those metal bars that they put in concrete to make it have it a little more structure. So the guy got actually hurt off of being dragged across rebar, and he was and he was sat there waiting for the police. What eventually came out was, and this is the phrase that I'll remember for the rest of my life. They found that not only did he violate this customer's rights by accusing him of a crime that he did commit with no proof, but he also and this was in Texas. He also violated their restrainment policy or something like that. Like, there's laws about when you're allowed to restrain someone and not. And the loss prevention dude just turns to us and goes, when you find a way to violate Texas's restraining law, you fucked up majorly. And so what ended up happening to the guy is the customer sued the company, rightly so. The company said, no, actually, he didn't follow our very simple guide on how to make an apprehension and didn't follow this rule, didn't follow this rule. And so they fired him. And the guy sued the company for a few $100,000. Like, it was not a cheap lawsuit. But for a large corporation, you can absorb $1 million lawsuit. Like, it's not that difficult. The store that I worked at did a few million dollars a year in total revenue. So absorbing $1 million lawsuit is not good, but it's something you can do. A person, like a single individual, getting $100,000 or multiple hundreds of thousands of dollars lawsuit levied against them, the guy lost everything. He lost his job. He could never work in the industry again. Lost his house. Bank foreclosed on it or something. Or I think it was taken as part of the lawsuit. His wife left him, took the kids. He didn't even get visitation because he was accused of a really heinous, violent crime. Like, the dude lost everything. And it was all because he believed something that he shouldn't. So back to the idea of friendship in business, and the story that I was told. So my friend heard that I was about to lose everything and become destitute, and went, okay, well, what do I need to do? And so the guy on the phone goes, how much money is in your register? And this particular store was in kind of a low-income area, and so most of our transactions were cash-based. Another kind of fun fact. And so he looked around, and the store had something like $3 or $4 grand in cash at that point, in a combination between the registers, and we also had a safe. And we hadn't had our cash picked up recently. And so what the guy on the phone said, well, he's willing to not press charges, but he's behind on his rent. So what I need you to do is I need you to take all the cash, and I need you to take it to this random parking lot in the middle of the city in the dead of night, and give it to some dude in a trench coat. Now, for any of you listening to this, you're probably thinking, wow, there's a lot of red flags there. Like, tons of them. Like, so many that we could create an entire, like, red outfit. Like, we could take the red flags and we could sew them, and we could create a really cool, like, red mage cosplay with how many red flags are there. To the point where we could probably make, like, 70 red mage cosplays. And if you've never seen a red mage, they're super cool, but everything is red, and they have a big red cape, and they have a super cool red, like, musketeer hat, and yeah, tons of red flags. However, because this person was considering me a friend and not a business associate, he was going to do whatever it took to save my job, which insulted me, because I'm like, you believed I would steal from a customer in the middle of a store where I know where all the cameras are? Why in the hell would you believe this? Doesn't matter. He believed I'd done it. He does that. I get called in on my day off. My manager goes, Jody, you need to come in now. Or I think, no, I was supposed to work that night. And I get called at like 8 in the morning. When I did not want to be awake at that particular point in time. So, what do you want? You need to come in now. I said, I close. No, you need to get your ass into the building right now. Okay, sure. And my boss never talked to me that way. We were pretty good friends as well. And he taught me so much about management. He's probably one of the best managers I've ever worked for. I drive into work. He goes, office, now. So who in the office is like, what the hell's going on? And he goes, this person is fucked. what are you talking about? Like, he's the reason I have a job in this store. They're giving him his own store, aren't they? He's like, no, 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 no. He's never going to work again. What are you talking? He explains this situation. And I said, you have got to be kidding me. He's like, no, we've got no cash on hand right now, which is a bad situation to be in a mostly cash store. Because we can't give change and stuff like that. We had to scramble and do all this nonsense to be able to get enough change to just function for the day. And yeah, they had to take him off the schedule, so they had to change the entirety of the schedule, which I think at that point I was writing as part of my management training. So it's like, yeah, we have to change the entire schedule. We have to do this. We have to... And no one is allowed to say anything. It is currently being investigated by the police. So you can't say anything to anyone. If any associate asks about it, deny, deny, deny. And what eventually ended up happening, I believe he resigned as opposed to getting fired. And now he does other stuff, and his life isn't completely over. But it was a stupid, stupid thing done entirely because he treated me like a friend instead of a business associate. And that's a dumb thing to do. And that's effectively what's been happening, especially in the kind of indie tabletop RPG space. But it goes all the way up to D&D, which again is the biggest aspect or biggest part of the market by a massive margin. Everybody in this space, because it started off as a hobby, still treats each other like friends and not like businesses. And even when you're publishing your own stuff, you treat your own stuff like a hobby and not like a business. And when you do stupid shit like believe someone else's lie and then publicly endorse somebody losing their job over it, in a business capacity, that's considered what's called a tort in legal terminology. Basically, it's I believe the tort is something like interference in business or something like that. It's something you can actually be sued for, and if they can prove that you intentionally did it, or you did it with such disregard to whether or not it was is true. Very similar to kind of defamation law. They either have to prove actual malice or basically, I can't remember what the term is, ineptitude, effectively. It was so stupid that there's no reason you should have believed it and you did it anyway, so that just shows that technically, no, you didn't know that you were lying, but it would have been fairly obvious, and if you had taken just the smallest 2 minutes to actually look up and try to verify it, you would have realized it was completely fake. That kind of thing. And it can turn into very, very large things. And effectively what's happening with Zach right now is he's suing a lot of people and apparently winning. According to this article, he's apparently won, of the 4 lawsuits that he has brought, he's won 3 times. The 4th one is currently undergoing litigation because every time it has been dismissed, he has appealed it to a higher court, which the higher court has gotten rid of the dismissal, sent it back to the same judge, which is one of the biggest issues I have with our legal system, is if a judge does something stupid and it gets turned over on appeal, a lot of times they will send it back to that judge. Specifically, the appeal board is basically telling the judge, hey, you fucked up, but we're going to give you a chance to do the right thing. Because if all that happens is we overturn the appeal, it's actually really bad for judges to have their judgments overturned. So if they just kind of return it to the original judge and the judge makes a different judgment, that can actually be more beneficial for the judge himself. That's why it happens so often, at least according to a lawyer that I follow. That's the reason why it happens. But what has happened is this same judge has dismissed it, I believe, 3 times now, or 2 times. And it has been knocked back to the appeals court, and each time it's gone to the appeals court, they have said, no, this dismissal never should have happened, and sent it back to this judge just so they could dismiss it again, to the point where apparently now that judge is retired, and so they can't send it back to that judge, so maybe this time it'll actually go through. But yeah, no, this is really, really bad stuff, and a lot of it has to do with people treating businesses as friendships. And it doesn't mean that you can't be friends with the people that you work with. A lot of businesses wouldn't exist if there wasn't some kind of friendship and camaraderie. But you have to understand that sometimes You have to, in the instance of running a business, you have to make a business decision over a friendship decision. A really good example is you have a friend that is just massively underperforming in their particular position, and you know that they need the job, but they can't do the job. And so a lot of friends will go, well, maybe I'll just help them out. Maybe I'll hire someone to give them some help, or I will do some of their work for them because I don't want to fire my friend. But from a business decision, what you should be doing is you sit them down and go, hey, listen, you're not performing at your job. And in order for this business to run, we need the person with your job to do that job. And if you can't do that, we have to find someone else to do it. If you can, that's perfectly fine. And there's a lot, and this is coming from the business trainer in me, there are a lot better ways to deal with an underperforming employee than firing them. However, firing is a very, very simple solution. And depending on how the market is, like the market right now is there are significantly less jobs than there are qualified people to do those jobs. So in that particular instance, it's actually easier on the company and technically costs less money for the company to fire someone and hire a better qualified candidate, generally for a lower pay, because if a person's been doing a job long enough to become friends with someone and is doing poorly in the job, they've probably been there a long time and have a much higher salary than someone brand new to that position would take. So what's really, really common is you just fire the person that's unperforming and get someone that actually will. From a training standpoint, there's a ton of other ways that you can deal with that. But they all involve, first of all, investing in training, which businesses don't want to do. They have off-sourced most of their training to computers and computer models, which has been disastrous. And even back when I could work, like 15 years ago, I guess it is at this point, we had already seen what happens when we offload our training to computers, is that we have an untrained staff that makes significantly more mistakes and costs us money. That was one of the ways that I became so successful at my job, is I stopped using the computer training and I started training people myself. And it was instantaneous success. I talk a lot about how in business world, which I guess I haven't mentioned this in a while, so a lot of you new people, you may not be aware of this. In business, any change that you make, the slowest turnaround time for you seeing results is generally about 3 months, 1 quarter. More often than not, you will not see results until 6 months, a year, or sometimes 2 or 3 years. Change in the business world takes time. And in addition to change taking time, the results take time as well, because there's so many other variables that exist within business. When I started training my own associates and told them to stop listening to what they were told in the computer training sessions, in 6 months, we went from dead last in the district to one of the top performing stores in one of the top performing districts in the company. And that was 6 months. That is unheard of in the business world, especially in retail. I went to another store and it took me, I think, a year there to go from not even just bottom of the district to a store that hadn't made a profit in over a decade to doing so well that the managers were going to get bonuses for hitting profit margin goals. So it's not just the store was making a profit. The store was doing so well, it was hitting the very lofty goals that no one in the company was hitting at that particular time. And that took me a year. So yeah, I am fairly confident that I know what I'm talking about in the idea that there are better ways to deal with employees than firing them. But from a business decision, you cannot treat a poorly performing employee as a friend. You have to treat them as a business partner. And that can mean investing in them, and it can mean firing them. But what it can't mean is going, well, they need the job. And so what we're seeing, bringing this all the way back, what we're seeing in the tabletop RPG community in general, much more common in the indie RPG space than it is in the kind of top echelons of like Pathfinder and D&D, but it still shows its ugly head there, is a lot of people who are friends that eventually become enemies, spreading lies about each other to try and make other people fail in the attempt to make them succeed, because a lot of people in business in general, but especially in the tabletop RPG market, consider the market to be what's called a zero-sum game. What that means is there is a limited amount of money to go around, and therefore if someone makes more money, by definition that means you have to make less money. That's what a zero-sum game is that anyone succeeding will only succeed if other people do poorly. And so a lot of people consider the tabletop RPG market a zero-sum game, where if my competitor is selling books, that means that I am not selling books, because the people that are buying their stuff instead of buying my stuff, which is not true in any way, shape, or form. I know a lot of people that support multiple RPGs. I am one of them. But it's a prevalent prevalent idea in the professional tabletop RPG space and in business in general. And so because of that, they feel, and this was another thing that was mentioned in the article, was the researcher actually asked someone, why would you do this? And one of the people, I'm trying to see if I can find the one that they specifically mentioned, that, hey, yeah, if they are successful, it means I'm not. So I'm perfectly fine with lying about another person, because it means that I'm going to do better. And I'm trying to see if I can find the actual one. Here it is. So one of the people who they just identified as B said this: conflict is common because, right, like on some level, and we all don't like admitting to this, a lot of our ideological conflicts are over resources. And we don't like talking about that, because really the reason that a lot of us think that certain people are bad is that they make money that we think should be in our pocket. It's not the most noble reason. This is not an uncommon thing to hear in the business world. A lot of business people firmly believe in the idea of a zero-sum game in every aspect of business, and it's just not true. There are some aspects, like once your market is as large as it's ever going to get and it's heavily saturated, it does come close to a zero-sum game, because the market is not really getting any larger. And if you are selling a product that is effectively designed to be a replacement for another product, it means that people are not going to buy both of your product and your competitor's product. Like the idea of, Oreos versus like the Walmart brand of Oreos. Well, people are going to buy one or the other. They're not going to generally buy both, because they both fill the same place in the market. And they're designed to be replacements for each other. One is the cheaper replacement, one is the higher quality name brand replacement. So a lot of people in business just consider everything to be a replacement game. And it's actually one of the things that you learn in business school, is being able to identify, what are things that are similar to your product and what specifically can act as a replacement for your product. So you can know which markets to avoid, because that particular product already has a massive stranglehold on that market, and there's no point in you attempting to enter it when people are going to choose this other product over yours. So yeah, like I said, it's fascinating to me that, first of all, that people didn't know this was going on, because again, I've known it has been going on for years. And it's also fascinating to me the fact that the author in the beginning says this is probably going to get me canceled, and 100% it has. Again, the article doesn't exist online anywhere. All of the recordings are gone. I have never in my life seen something react that quick. And it's been days since it went up. It's not like this is up for a week and everybody was covering it. Nobody is talking about this. Anywhere that it is brought up, it is immediately deleted. You cannot talk about it on r/RPG, or most of Reddit, they will not allow you to post about it. There's a few Reddits for less great places on the internet that's full of a lot of right-wing trolls, for lack of a better term, that will allow it to be. But everywhere else, like, you're not allowed to talk about it. You're not allowed to reference it. It's been deleted from Medium. SoundCloud refuses to host it. And again, I have no idea what's going to happen when I post my video about this and blatantly say that, yes, these people 100% were lying about this. And yes, I 100% believe that Zach's innocent. I don't believe that there's anyone that actually looks at the evidence that could come to any conclusion other than that. Does that mean that I'm going to get canceled or something like that? It's possible. If this channel disappears randomly, those of you that watch this video, you know why. Or if I suddenly release a statement that doesn't sound like it was written by me, declaring that everything I said in here was completely wrong, you'll know why as well. But yeah, like this is... A lot of people don't realize that this stuff happens. And the only reason that it's starting to get a little more attention is because it's become mainstream. And cancel culture in and of itself has become incredibly effective. And one of the things that have given me just the slightest bit of hope for the world is the fact that cancel culture is losing its power, and we're starting to see it in massive ways. Things like Hogwarts Legacy was the #1 selling game of 2023. And that pissed off a lot, or actually it didn't piss off a lot of people. It pissed off a very tiny minority of people that felt that they get to choose what games are published. Now, if you have a problem with the game, that is perfectly fine. I'm not saying that you're wrong about that. But the fact that not only was Hogwarts Legacy popular, but is the best-selling game of the year, despite the fact that people were going out, there was websites that you could go to that you could plug in a streamer's name to find out if they had streamed the game so that you could report them and cancel them. They were doing everything they possibly could to ruin this game. A lot of it based on lies, which were brought into effect. And again, the whole reason behind it is that these particular people don't like J.K. Rowling, which your opinions of J.K. Rowling are yours. I have my own opinions. I'm not going to share them here because I really don't think they're relevant. But if you decide that you don't like this particular person, that is perfectly fine, and I'm not going to say that you're wrong or evil or anything like that. You are entitled to your own opinions. And if you think the game itself is horrible because it makes her money, again, perfectly fine. But the idea that because you don't like it, you can force other people not to do it, that's cancel culture. And we're starting to see their power dying. And that, to me, is a good thing, because maybe we'll get back to the point where the people that get punished are the people that actually do wrong things, instead of publishing a game developer that has nothing to do with J.K. Rowling or her beliefs, and just purchased a license to create, from as far as I can tell, I've not played the game. I do not own the game. As far as I can tell, it's a fun game. Like, everyone that has actually taken the time to play it has said it's not only is it a fun game, but it's also not controversial in its opinions. Like, there's nothing in it that is considered anti anything. There was this little spiel that people tried to say that it's anti-Semitic, and it was never true. As a Jewish person, I can tell you right now, nothing in the game has ever offended me. And all the examples that they gave are anti-Semitic tropes that they, I guess, believe to be true. So I think a lot of the people that were claiming that this is an anti-Semitic game are anti-Semites. Well, these characters have long noses and care about money. That means that they're in reference to the Jews. No, that's an anti-Semitic trope. That, the fact that people of Jewish descent do have large noses is a thing. And there are also other physical features that make it possible to identify people of Jewish descent. That's a real thing. The fact that they somehow, that all people of Jewish descent somehow, or all people of the Jewish faith somehow covet money or anything like that, is an anti-Semitic trope that's been proven wrong over and over and over again. A lot of people point to the fact that a lot of banks are run by people of Jewish descent, and a lot of the reason for that is actually anti-Semitism. They actually weren't allowed to work a lot of jobs, but the banking industry was one industry where they were allowed to work there. And for some bizarre reason, when you take an entire group of people and force them to only work in a small subset of jobs, they get really good at it. It's weird. So if anyone ever wonders why, all these banks are run by Jewish people, it's because for a long time they weren't allowed to do other jobs. And that was the only one that and they got real good at it. So yeah, I believe it's one of the same reasons why the whole idea of Jewish people run Hollywood. Again, it has to do with the fact that they had a lot of money and they were able to use that money to start a lot of businesses. And again, a lot of that is due to the fact that they were forced into an occupation that literally makes money. So anyway, this has been a long, rambly thing about something that I find absolutely fascinating and terrifying at the exact same time. It is possible that this article is pure malarkey. Like I said, I don't believe it is, and I had a friend look it over, and again, they came to the conclusion that the research itself looks to be above board. They were not particularly fond of the conclusions that were drawn, but they don't have any, to my understanding, they don't have any problem with the article itself, and they don't believe it's like fan fiction or anything like that. It's solid stuff. Just kind of focused on not answering the initial question postulated. Yeah, it's theoretically possible that we eventually find out that the reason that this was memory hold was because it was entirely untrue. I sincerely doubt it. Generally, when something like that is actually untrue, you get a bunch of websites like Snopes and other things like that, printing articles and talking about how wrong they are. No, this was memory hold. It ceased to exist. To me, that leads it credence that something in there is true enough that it's not allowed to be known. And for me, personally, that means that I think everyone needs to talk about it. And if I'm called a right-wing conspiracy theorist or whatever, I'm perfectly fine with that. Again, my life already sucks. Anyone that's been watching the daily vlog this month knows how much my life sucks. There's not a ton that people can do to make my life suck more. And the few things that they can do to make my life suck more will require a lot of work. And if they're willing to put that much work into making my life suck or making my life end, there's probably not a lot I can do to stop them. So I'm kind of resolute in the idea that I see this as a miscarriage of justice. I see this as lies being used to ruin people's lives. And that personally hits home for me because I've had it happen to me multiple times. And I have extremely strong feelings about lies and misinformation. It's a trigger for my PTSD. And so, yeah, I'm a little bit fixated on this, but I think it's something that needs to be talked about more. And I'm going to tell you right now, if you decide to signal boost this, if you decide to talk about it anywhere on the internet as anything other than a bold-faced lie, I'm relatively certain they will come for you. So please do not get into this fight if you are unwilling to take a pretty massive hit for it. It's one of the reasons why I'm not mentioning the person that I talked to kind of, not really verify, but just to kind of look it over and see if it's complete malarkey. This is the kind of thing that can end not just careers, it's the kind of thing that can end lives. So I completely understand anyone in the comments that wants to call me a horrible, disgusting person. I completely understand the reason why. You may actually believe that, or it may be a way to save your own skin. And I am not going to differentiate between the two. Say whatever you want in the comments. Crucify me anywhere that you want. If that's what you need to do to survive, that's perfectly fine. And if you really believe this crap, you're a moron. But due to the fact that the ability to distinguish between the morons and the people that are saving their own skins is not something that I have the time or energy to devote, I'm just going to give everyone the benefit of the doubt and go, if you decide to crucify me over this, then you are doing something to help yourself, and that is 100% okay. It's not fair to expect other people to sacrifice themselves for your ideals. It's just not. And as someone who has taken a very, very long time to learn that it is okay to do things for your own defense and for your own existence and your own survival. That was what I was looking for, survival. It's okay to do things for the express the express purpose of your own survival. And it doesn't make you a bad person. It makes you a living person. And that's perfectly okay. So whatever happens because of this, I thought it was an interesting thing to talk about. And again, I firmly believe that the fact that this has been memory hold is more proof that this is 100% true. And I would love for everyone to become aware of it. I would love to see the people that that made up this shit actually have to face justice. Do I believe that's going to happen? Absolutely not. Zach's name is already so... There's such a negative connotation attached to his name that I don't believe he will ever be able to publicly join this field again. Which, again, according to the article, according to the people that have worked with him, he's apparently very good at what he does. So it's sad that he can no longer work in a field that he's extremely good at. And I'm not talking about the adult entertainment industry. I'm talking about tabletop RPGs. So yeah, we'll see what happens. If this video disappears, you'll know why. Because again, in the same instance that I will not hold against anyone else doing something for their own survival, if this turns into something that threatens my survival, it may disappear as well. I've had this conversation with my therapist a few times. I can't remember if it was actually in a court hearing or if it was just in something leading up to it. But I remember specifically talking about some of the struggles that I go through and just what it's like to live my life. And somebody, I don't remember who, it might have been a judge, it might have been opposing counsel or something like that. It could have just been a secretary that was taking files to be added to the case. I don't know who it was. It just, somebody said, no one could live like that. I said, well, I do. It's like, no, you've got to be lying, because anyone that would have to live a life like yours would have tried to kill themselves. And yeah, I was telling this to my therapist, and I basically said, yeah, my life fucking sucks, and I would never want anyone to live my life. And I don't understand how I continue to live it, because it just keeps getting worse. But you know what? It's my fucking life, and it's my shitty life, and I'm allowed to keep it if I want to, despite the fact that no one else will ever want my life. It's mine. And if I want to keep this broken, disgusting, shit-stained, worthless excuse of a life, I'm allowed to, because it's mine. So yeah, if I get to a point where I'm worried about this turning into something where I will no longer have my life, I will delete it, pretend it never happened again. Because I don't like the stuff that I have to live with every day, but I like being alive. And I think the longer I am alive, the more likely that I will be able to impact the world in a positive way. And I believe I have already changed people's lives for the better. So as long as that still remains a remote possibility, that going on for another day will make it so that the world itself is just the tiniest bit better, I'm willing to live through this hellhole. Anyway, it's going to be all for me today. Hopefully, I will see you guys tomorrow. And if not, I guess we'll see. All right? Bye-bye.